Joe Biden has reportedly given in to Ukrainian pleas for permission to use long-range American missiles against targets inside Russia. The US president had resisted Kyiv's demands for months, with American officials worried about the danger of escalating the conflict with nuclear-armed Russia, as well as the risk of depleting its own stocks of the valuable munitions. The New York Times and the Washington Post, which first reported the news, said the shift came in response to North Korean troops being deployed alongside Russian soldiers in the Kursk border region. Well, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky did not confirm the news, but said missiles would speak for themselves.
Today, there's a lot of talk in the media about us receiving permission for respective actions. But strikes are not carried out with words. Such things are not announced. Missiles will speak for themselves. They certainly will.
Well, for more on the significance of this announcement and its timing, I'm joined on set by our international affairs editor, Philip Turle. Philip, after months of pressure from Ukraine, why has this announcement come now?
Well, I think that there are several reasons that have pushed the American president to make this decision. First of all, there's been a lot of pressure on him from Ukraine itself, from Volodymyr Zelensky, to give the green light for these missiles to be used to fire into Russian territory, especially in the Donbass region, to try to push the Russian forces back there. What these missiles are going to be used for is to attack munitions depots, areas where the army is gathering, purely to do with defending Ukraine, but not going to be fired, for example, at schools, at hospitals or residential areas. That's according to the rules that have been set up when it comes to combat, which of course have not been respected at all by the Russians when they've been firing missiles into Ukraine. The second point is, I think that the events over the past few days have convinced the US president that really there is absolutely no hope of negotiating any kind of deal with Vladimir Putin. He's not interested in going to the negotiating table unless he's able to keep hold of everything that he's already conquered in Ukraine, and that basically it's a waste of time. This phone call that happened between the German Chancellor Scholz and Vladimir Putin led to nothing, and I think there's a general feeling, even from the French President Emmanuel Macron, that whatever you try to do to talk to Vladimir Putin, it's not going to get anywhere. The only thing that Vladimir Putin is going to take any notice of is if he gets a bloody nose, and that's why they've given the green light for these missiles to be used to be fired into Ukrainian territory. It just, I think, depends now on how this is going to take place, where these missiles are going to be used for. And one other point which was brought up in that report is that I think there's concern about the fact that there are these thousands of North Korean troops that have been drafted into Russia to try to push back Ukrainian forces in the Kursk region in northeastern Russia, that also the time has come maybe to be able to use these long-range missiles to try to stop them from making any further advances.
So what does all this mean for the course of the war? I mean, will it be decisive for the Ukrainians?
I think that what the US would like to do is achieve three things. First of all, they want to rearrange the cards for the end game, the negotiating part, where Russia knows it can't get any further and it has got to go to the negotiating table. Push back the Russian forces, let Russia know that it can't get any further and will have to retreat because it's been making gains steadily over the past few months to the detriment of Ukraine. This is a way for the US to let Ukraine hopefully take the advantage and then put them in a stronger position when it comes to negotiating. The second point is that Joe Biden knows that he's only got 2 months left in office. If he's going to do something, it's now or never. It may be too little too late, but he wants to be able to leave a trace, to be able to say, this is my legacy for my time in office, that I've managed to try to move towards a ceasefire deal and an end to the war in Ukraine. And I think there's worry about what Donald Trump is going to do when he takes office. First of all, will he want to continue funding the war in Ukraine the way it's being funded now by the United States? Will he want to continue funding NATO? Or will the US want to pull out of NATO? All of these are quite worrying developments if they occur for the future of the war in Ukraine from Ukraine's point of view and from the US's point of view as the way that they have been supporting the country. So it's right now that Joe Biden needs to take action to make sure that there is some kind of end deal that can be negotiated once Donald Trump gets into the White House.
And what about the Russians? Have we had any reaction from Moscow? What are they likely to say about all this?
Well, no reaction so far from the Russians. The only thing we know is that Vladimir Putin has put conditions on this, as this is one of the red lines, another one now has been crossed, saying that if these missiles are used, what it basically means is that it is NATO firing missiles on Russian territory because they're coming from the United States and the US is a member of NATO. So that makes this a much wider conflict, and that will give the Russians the permission to use their missiles against NATO countries, basically those countries bordering on Ukraine which are members of NATO. And what the NATO rule says, Article 5, is that an attack against one NATO country is an attack against all NATO countries. That is why the US didn't want to give this permission, because they're scared this could lead to a much wider conflict in the region. Second point, Vladimir Putin's always gone on about using nuclear weapons, saying that I could use nuclear weapons against you, be careful not to make this a much wider conflict. I think there's a feeling in Washington that he won't do that, because he knows that if he uses nuclear weapons, then also the West will use nuclear weapons against the Russians, and that will lead to the annihilation of Vladimir Putin and the Russian leadership. So it's not in their interest to do that. But this is certainly a very big decision on the part of the US, coming at a time when Ukraine feels that it's losing its battle against the Russians. Will this change the course of the war? Well, that we'll have to wait and see.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Philip Turle, for that analysis.